What's up, everybody? This is A7X Van Ben, and this video is about the restarting rules for Pirate CSG that I made and the new master keyword list and why those changes were made. So basically, ever since I was getting really serious about the restarting Pirates project around 2021 and started making some progress on it, I knew I wanted to improve the rules without changing them too much. Compatibility with the original game was always paramount, and I wanted to basically improve a handful of things I thought should be improved. And some experiments were run, especially during the playtesting of Golden Seas, the new set, that didn't really end up making it into the final version of these rules. But there were more changes, like the points in play endgame condition, but that kind of got scrapped a little bit because I think it was a little bit too much of a change that kind of affected things too much. But anyway, so these are going to be the changes that were made and why. So first off, one rules document. I think it's a little confusing. The start here and complete game rules make it a little bit iffy. It is, start here rules can be good for beginner players, but I like to have just one all-in-one document. So here, there's a little bit of the start here stuff towards the top. You recognize a few of those screenshots, but the other stuff is just kind of baked into these various aspects. So for example, move action is much expanded compared to the complete game rules because it includes the start here aspects, but in text form, which is basically from the pirate code. So there's also sentences and phrases from the pirate code in these rules. I kind of took a comprehensive approach to creating this to incorporate as many documents as possible while still trying to streamline it. So it's 8 pages, not too massive, and that includes the last page, which is just the changes. So really it's 7 pages, and then with an extra page to explain the changes that were made. So 2 action limit is clearly defined under rules of the high seas, so that's still on the first page, similar to one of the original rule books. I think it's on the first page of most of the complete game rules, but here it's listed out instead of being kind of buried somewhere else. Or actually, I think it wasn't even in the complete game rules until Savage Shores, the final set. So I wanted to make sure that was front and center, just to make sure everybody understands that it is an official rule. And the standard build total changed from 40 to 60. You can still use any build total, of course, but I ran some polls and 60 was really popular. And a lot of folks have complained over the years that 40 doesn't really give you enough points to build the type of fleet you want, and sometimes it's only like 2 or 3 ships. So, and it's kind of restrictive sometimes too. So, and I think 60 works pretty well with the new set Golden Seas, and it also is pretty fun with the points and play house rule as well. So 60 is a really nice sweet spot for the build total. And the any build total can be chosen part is underlined for emphasis. That's partly because although 40 is a decent point limit, I kind of I almost dislike a little bit how frequently it's used. I think it's really fun to change it up and to go with different build totals, like 40, 50, 60, 80, 100 usually are the ones I use. So I wanted to just kind of emphasize that people can do whatever they want. A lot of the game is about freedom and customizability between the fleets you make, the build total, the map size, and the choices you make during the game and where to sail. Like there's no hex grid, there's no board, there's no islands that never change between games. Everything is different from game to game, and there's a lot of freedom and customizability. So I wanted to kind of emphasize that with the build total as well. Events should not be used unless all players agree to allow them. Originally, I think this was a straight up ban, but I kind of, if anything, I might be a little too harsh on events. Kind of maybe overreacted them a little bit in the past because of mermaids and Be Calmed and Hidden Cove a little bit. But so this one is, I think it's a good in between. So it doesn't ban them. We don't really want to ban original game pieces. At least I don't really want to, and I don't really want there to be a ban list for this game. So here I just said, like, if you're using events, you got to kind of tell the other players, and then they're like, okay, we can use events, but if they don't want them, you can negotiate and things like that. So Round Earth is now the default boundary rule. This one, Wolf did disagree with me, and I understand why. It does add complexity, and it adds a little bit of like gaminess to the measuring system, because it's kind of hard to like get exact placement over round earth sometimes. But I really think it makes the game a lot more dynamic. It makes home island like disadvantaged choices matter less, and I think it makes home island raiders better, which is more fun and adds to the piracy element of the game, because obviously a home island raiding would be a primary, piratical action to take. So I think round earth is a net positive for the game. I will say, if you're playing with beginners or kind of the old school players, you might not want to do this, but overall I just wanted to emphasize it, and I wanted to include it. So, and of course this is still, flat earth is still listed under the alternative options. So it's not like you have to use round earth. I'm not trying to impose it on people. I would like to see it as a default for the game going forward. I think it's a lot more dynamic, and I just think it improves the game. So that was the primary reason for including it, just like most of these. Some of them more for clarity, like the 2-action limit. Some of them more to actually, improve the game, which is most of them. So flat earth now includes players cannot voluntarily move their ships over the edge. That may have been in the code, I think, but either way, it basically just makes it harder to suicide, because if you don't want to, you want to have somebody get the most gold, they know they're ahead, and then just throw their fleet off the map. So I just made sure to include that. Islands must be placed at least 2L from each other rather than 3L. This makes speed, like base moves, matter less, because slower ships can get to islands faster, and the faster ships sometimes have so much speed that they can get to an island even without a helmsman. So basically, it kind of helps out the slower ships a little bit, and it makes the game a little bit more exciting and dynamic, because you're probably going to have more player interaction because it's easier to get around the map. Of course, that's a minimum distance. The max, you can still place them farther apart, but I think 3L is a little bit far for a minimum in terms of player interaction and having fast games and things like that. So it's 2L to 6L instead of 3L to 6L. This was actually only 1L for a lot of the playtesting period for Golden Seas, but I kind of realized towards the end that I didn't. It's like really close, because 1L, it gets ridiculous, because then you can have a ship with S speed at a helmsman, and if their minimum distance you can get from one island to another, you could dock and explore an island with a ship with S speed plus a helmsman on turn 1, which just feels kind of ridiculous. So, and also for realism, it's almost like, there's no sailing time. Sailing distance between the islands is kind of, comically fast, which just feels kind of goofy. So I made that was kind of a late add, actually, towards the end, right? I think it was like almost right before I finalized this. I was like, you know what, that's not, I think 1L was a little too close. So, and of course you could always house rule this stuff away. This is just general guidance for what I'd like to see the rules look like going forward. And basically the rule set for Golden Seas. So obviously play however you want. I'm not trying to impose my will on the player base or anything, but these are good suggestions based on my experience playing the game. I've played it almost 600 times, so hopefully these are all good changes. I realize that some of these changes may cause additional rules issues, but I feel like it's worth it to do that, especially since there's already a ton of rules questions with the original rules. We already have a pirate code FAQ that's over 60 pages. So, changing things now, years after the game originally went out of print, I don't think it's gonna break any hearts. So and rules issues at this point, you kind of also have to accept that rules issues are inevitable with this game. To eliminate that, you'd have to make a new game or rebuild the rules from the ground up, I think. So, which I'm not really interested in doing. So, terrain, this is a big one. I played with this house rule for years in most of my non-competitive games, and it's been really fun. So, as most people know, the terrain, when you have to place it SOA from any other terrain or island, it's super easy to get around and ignore. And a lot of times terrain is completely irrelevant in games outside of maybe some like fog banks or whirlpools that people want to use on purpose. But especially a lot of the hazard terrain like reefs and Sargasso seas, under the standard rules, they can just be avoided super easily. So this way you can touch them to islands, and you can also create like big chains, like a reef chain, to make it more relevant and actually create real obstacles for players. So should make terrain better and more relevant. And here I don't really love the original rules, how they choose home islands. I like to just do reverse turn order. This has pros and cons that I don't know if I even fully grasp yet. But I don't really like how you choose the other player's home island and stuff like that. I think it works decently well in competitive. Like 1v1 40 point is solid, and there's always a space for that, but a lot of people don't like playing competitive, and I think this kind of simplifies it too. I will say it does get confusing in multiplayer. If you have like 5 players, and then like the last player chooses the home island, the first player, and then I think it's like the 4th player would choose the 2nd player's home island. Like if you have like a lot of players, it just gets confusing. So I like to simplify it and just have the last player choose their home island first, and then go on that way until the first player is the last to choose their home island. So a little bit of a simplification there. I realize there's pros and cons to that, but anyway, that's how I like to do it. Changes to links. So this is straight from Wolf, basically. I was kind of unsure how to go about this. This was kind of on the table. Like this was almost not included, I believe. I was kind of hesitant whether or not I wanted to change the linking rules, but when I was discussing with Wolf through email, I really liked what he came up with here. With they basically share a single cargo space, and then if there's a linked crew that links to a ship, the crew does not take up cargo space. So that's kind of how a lot of people kind of interpreted it anyway. But this way, what I like about this is that you can have multiple crew that link. So if multiple links are present on a ship, all crew that link share the same single cargo space. Under the original rules, you can't really do that when you have like 3 or more like linked pieces. So I think this is, you can thank Wolf for this. I think it's a good improvement. So all right, so that's kind of the first chunk of rules in the setup. And then this, I think it looks like I hit an enter. I have a paragraph break because these are like for actions, I believe. So movement bonuses can be applied anytime during a move action rather than just at the end after base movement segments are completed. So this one was never in the complete game rules or even the start. This was never in the pack rules as far as I could find. It was just a code ruling. So a lot of people already were not using it. That's number one. Number two, in the rules survey that I ran, that I'll include a link to in the description if you want to check it out or take the rules survey if you've played the game a lot. In that survey, people wanted this, basically. They didn't want movement bonuses to only apply at the end of a move action. So that was added. And so now you can move, like if a ship has L base move, but as a helmsman, you can move S and then the L instead of having to move the L first. So probably not a big change for a lot of people. I understand some folks were already doing that, but anyway, so I wanted to put that in there. Boarding, this is all me. This is to make boarding better. This is probably, I don't know if this is my number one house rule, but it's along with reversing the Whirlpool D6 roll result. This boarding change is probably the house rule I've used more than any other. And I've used this in almost all of my non-competitive games for probably close to a decade now. So winner chooses whether to take a treasure eliminated crew. Winner chooses which treasure to take. So they look at all of them, take what they want. Loser still chooses which crew to eliminate. So instead of loser chooses for everything, now the winner has agency over 2 out of the 3, options or choices, basically. So I think that really makes boarding better, and it makes boarding more dangerous from a treasure perspective. So part of the reason I kept the loser's choice for the crew to eliminate is it gets too unbalanced. Boarding gets too good if you can board an enemy ship and then just choose to eliminate their best crew. It gets a little too extreme. So, but overall, this really adds to the piracy element of the game, because instead of boarding not being that great, here you can actually look at all the coins they have. That alone is valuable from an informational perspective, and then you can take whatever you want, which really helps you feel more like an actual pirate rather than just getting the one that they don't really need anyway. So if they have like a low value coin on board, so that really helps out boarding. And that's one of the things I've seen over the years that people really wanted an improvement to boarding. It doesn't revolutionize it. I'm not trying to make a boarding mini game or make it like a winner take all craziness situation or anything, but it definitely improves it a decent amount. All right, without changing too much from the original rules. It basically just goes from loser's choice to winner's choice on those first two things. So, and then there's some edits for clarity. Made it clear that towing can occur when a ship is towing the bow of a derelict, not just at the end of a move action. That was based on the reference diagrams, I believe, with like some of the towing options. So some of these are edits for clarity rather than anything else, really, just to make it, more obvious. Because ideally, you don't need the pirate code or the reference diagrams to play a full game or to play the game as it was intended. But the rules got so convoluted and like so many things were added in the pirate code that it gets confusing. So I wanted to include some things from those documents, the code and the reference diagrams, that really should have been in the complete game rules from either from the start or from, when they were thought of. Like maybe that started in Davy Jones' Curse, but they just didn't put it in the complete game rules for whatever reason. Maybe because they ran out of space. I mean, the rules packets are small and they had to fit into a pack. So maybe that restricted WizKids a bit. I'm not sure. So docking a towed ship at an island or fort when the towing ship docks is now optional. This is one I got a little annoyed with the original rules, because like sometimes you don't want to dock the towed ship. So that one's just a small little change, so it's not automatic. Ships with any number of masts can now ram and board. They don't need to have at least one mast. This is something that Witch and I talked about multiple times when we were playing Washington a few years ago, back in the early 2020s. So I think that's a good change. And once again, you want boarding to play a role in a game about piracy. So disabling the option of ramming and boarding, even when you can move while derelict, just seems kind of odd. I guess maybe it was like a weight thing. Like if a ship is just rowing, maybe it can't have as much momentum going forward as if it was sailing, like if it had a mast. But either way, I think this is a positive change overall. So successful ram eliminates mast. Oh, this is just an edit for clarity. This was just, for some reason, the complete game rules have removed from the game after eliminated under that text, which just is really weird. So that's just a tiny edit for clarity. Treasures are always looked at when exploring. They're not under the start here rules, just to simplify things, I guess, is why they added that or didn't add it. But that's one of the biggest problems with the existing rules, is that the start here rules lead you to believe that treasure is taken randomly from Wild Islands, which of course messes everything up. It destroys unique treasures completely, because you normally have to take those. So I just made sure to include that so that there's no confusion from the old start here rules. Treasure from a sunken ship is not split between players in a 2-player game. It's always removed from the game regardless of the number of players. I like that one. Wolf liked that one. And it's just kind of weird how it's split. So anyway, and I think that makes it a little bit harder for pure combat fleets to win competitive 2-player games, which is probably a good thing. So you can't just steamroll the opponent with HMS Grand Temple and then, if they have an odd number of gold, if they have 9 gold on their ship and it's their last ship because you're just destroying all their ships in their fleet, and then you sink the last one, you would win 5-4 based on the discrepancy here. We'd split it, or you wouldn't split it, I should say. So you could still win on units in play, of course, but anyway, it was kind of weird. I also find this kind of weird where it's treated differently, 2-player versus multiplayer. So here it's just always gone in this case. So you don't have to think about, not having it split when you're doing multiplayer. So, all right. So added, this was just an edit for clarity. The original rules don't talk about how many flags on a fort there are, but obviously it has to match the number of cannons it has on the card, or like the deck, the fort base pretty much. So this is something a bunch of new players have asked about over the years, actually. I think mostly on YouTube or elsewhere online. I've seen a lot of people kind of confused about, why the forts come with 8 flags, but then they can't actually have that many cannons. So I wanted to make sure to include that. I think that's an add from the code, but it was not in the fort building rules in the complete game rules. So I added that. Players are not required to unload regular treasure when they dock at friendly forts. That's kind of similar to the towing thing where you don't have to dock the towed ship. I just wanted to make it optional, because sometimes you might dock a ship with treasure at a friendly fort just to repair it, but you don't want you don't want to dump the treasure and then have to re-explore the island just to get it back on the ship. So I don't think it should be automatic. I think you should have the agency. The players should have the choice of whether or not they want to unload it. At friendly forts, of course. At home islands, it's still automatic. Forts can repair with a shipwright in them, including when they have no flags left. This is both to make shipwrights better and more worth their point cost, and also it just seems like it makes sense. And that it makes forts a little bit better too. Sometimes when forts get hit, they can get destroyed really quickly. So remove the wording about abandoned forts because it's unnecessary. So that was just a small edit for clarity. Icebergs can now continue moving after hitting islands. I never really liked how they stop for the entire game if that happens. So now they can just, they still move around. Sargasso Sea reworded for clarity. That one, Sargasso Sea is the most confusing original terrain piece. So that one, I don't remember the exact wording changes. You can look it up if you want to see the complete game rule changes, but just made it a little better. Whirlpools are bad on rolls 1 to 3 and equipment can be lost to them. So originally they're bad on a 4 through 6 roll, but usually you want to roll high in this game for a good result. So I don't know why here, it just makes more sense to have a bad result if you roll low. And then equipment didn't exist when whirlpools were introduced in Ocean's Edge. So I think that's why they were excluded from the ability text of the terrain. But I don't really see why you wouldn't be able to just lose an equipment. So I included that. Sea creature rules move to the bottom of rules. Text heavily modified and specific game mechanics will be addressed as part of sea creature type keywords, not in the sea creature rules. This was one of the biggest changes I made. And this I consulted with Wolf as well, of course, like with most of these changes. There's pros and cons to this, but overall, this got shortened. And then when I go to the master keyword list, I'll show you some of the sea creature changes. So no more than half the starting gold endgame condition in 2-player games. So that's one that Wolf was a fan of as well. So that way, if you have 16 gold out of 30, for example, in a 2-player game, you don't automatically win. So a little bit of pros and cons to that. Might extend games a little bit, but overall probably a good change, because I think in the survey that I ran, I think a lot of people weren't using that anyway. So endgame, this one could ruffle a few feathers. Endgame condition changed to only one player can give future move actions, rather than half or more players cannot give future move actions. So could extend the games, because now it's like a last man standing thing, rather than, if 3 or more players are out in a 6-player game, it just ends. So I understand this might not be everyone's favorite, because it could extend the game where in a 6-player game, if you have 4 players eliminated and the other 2 just go on for hours, people might have to leave. So, but overall, I just always found it kind of odd that it was half or more. I don't really like the way it was treated. And I also don't really like how it kind of benefits like a suicidal move, because if you're winning in a 6-player game and there's already 2 players out, that you can, if you just eliminate your fleet, then there'd be half or more players out that can't give future move actions, and that triggers the count. It triggers the end game condition, and then you could win. So I like giving agency to the players that can survive the game, basically. So here, if there's only 2 players left in that same example in a 6-player game, they can duke it out and they can have agency over how the end game plays out. So that way there's an incentive to keep your ships, and there's less of an incentive to sabotage your fleet, and when you're ahead, basically. So definitely an interesting one. I think in a lot of games it won't really be that relevant, but in some of the larger multiplayer games, I think it could prove to be interesting. So, and then, like I said, some pirate code text was added, just mostly for clarity, and a few things that I already went over, like the 2 action limit that got added because they should be in there, and then some wording changes for clarity and brevity. So that's the rules. And then we've got the new master keyword list, and a lot of these remained the same. This is one thing where early on in playtesting, more of these were changed, and then they went back to normal. because I realized the changes, play testing revealed some of my changes to be not great. So there's only a few changes really. So we're going to go through those real quick here. So shipwright made better. It can repair forts. And if the ship repairs while docked or home island under a friendly fort with this crew aboard, she can repair 2 masts in 1 repair action. So I'm trying to make shipwrights worth their cost. They're really not worth it under the original rules, but for 2 points, now they're a lot better. So you can repair 2 masts at a time, only if you're at your home island or friendly fort and you still have the crew there, or aboard the ship. Obviously you have to have the crew assigned. And then you can also repair fire masts, which makes sense to me. And it's more of a general repair specialist now, instead of just, repairing at sea 1 mast per turn. So, and then of course, the forts thing. So, and you can place the flag of a fort, a repaired fort, in any open position on the walls. Okay. Sea monsters may move and shoot using the same move action. So that one is to improve them. That's a change that I think a lot of folks will be happy with. Sea monsters under the original rules are just not that good. They're pretty much almost all of them are overpriced for what they do. I made sure this only applied to sea monsters, because if you gave this to sea dragons or titans or even kraken, it would be overpowered. So here it would just apply to the giant squids, the sea serpents, and the sharks. So those sea creature types are the sea monsters. So now they basically have the captain ability built in. So it is built into the keyword specifically. So if you canceled sea monster, it would take that away. So, but yeah, so that should make them better. Hopefully not too good, but I think most of them, instead of very few of them being worth their cost, now hopefully, I don't know, maybe more than half of them are worth using. Maybe, I don't know, not necessarily in competitive games, but a lot of them, could actually be used now instead of being dead weight in a fleet. So sea creature type keywords revamped in various ways. This is what I was talking about with the restarting rules. We'll go over a couple examples. Now each keyword says what that creature type can do without overly relying on the sea creature rules to define what they can and can't do. So let's just peek at Titan, for example. So usually most of these changes concern spelling out the actions, because under the original sea creature rules, I think it talks about how sea creatures cannot be given repair and explore actions. So now with these modified keywords, it basically says the actions they can be given. So Titans still can't repair, but they can be given explore actions. Sea monster, they can only be given move and shoot actions. So basically making it keyword specific instead of having to rely on the sea creature rules, which are a little bit confusing. And hopefully that's a good change. Talked with Wolf about that one as well. It seemed like the best way to do it without doing a complete overhaul. I didn't want to revamp the entire thing and destroy compatibility or anything. So and then this was another change to make them a little bit better. If a sea monster or titan eliminates crew via boarding, it may repair one of its segments as a free action. So it's a kind of a niche thing, but it can still happen in games. And if you're missing a segment when a boarding party, kind of think of it as eating the crew, and then the creature gets energy from that or whatever, so it can regenerate a segment. So not a big change, but another thing to hopefully make sea creatures a little bit better. Scorpions can now board sea creatures with their blade attack. That originally was not possible. I think it should be possible, because then this is almost never going to be relevant, and obviously, boarding a kraken or a sea dragon is kind of, I don't know if that could ever be relevant, but in this case, for example, a scorpion could use its blade and board a sea monster that is carrying a coin and try to steal it, for example. So I just felt it should at least be possible instead of, outlawed. And then changed boarding action to boarding party. That was a change because boarding is technically a free action, I guess, but I thought this was a good change to make, because I just don't want people to be confused and think boarding action is a full action, because there's so many references to it in so many different abilities that I think it could kind of confuse new players, and I don't want them to think that, or I don't want anybody to think that boarding is one of the primary actions like move, shoot, repair, explore. So I just changed that wording a little bit. So overall, those are the changes and why I made them. So hopefully you enjoy the restarting rules in the new master keyword list. You can check the description to download them from pirateswithben.com. And beyond that, feel free to let me know what you think of them. If you think I should have added more, if you disagree with them, obviously not trying to tell everybody this is how they need to play, but hopefully good changes and that make the game more enjoyable going forward. And hopefully you can use them and get some fun play out of them. So thanks for watching. Thanks for playing, and hope you have fun using them.